That verse is sung wrong. She said it so low that by every law of ears and stone I should not have heard it. The hall was loud, 100 wolves at the long tables, the fire roaring, my bard hammering out the old hold song for the midwinter feast. But I heard her. 4 words from the shadow of the hearth, from the girl who carried ash, and they went through all that noise and struck me like a hand laid flat against my chest. I turned my head, the bard sang on, no one else had heard. She stood where the servants always stood, half behind the great chimney breast, a wooden pail of cold cinders in her hands, her eyes already down. A gray shift, a gray shawl, hair the color of wet iron pulled back and covered. The kind of person a hall like mine is built to look past. I had ruled Hearth-Girl 3 winters, and I could not have told you her name. But I had heard her, and she had said the song was wrong. I am Torin, Alpha King of Hearth-Girl, the gray hold on the high moor where the wind never truly stops, and I will tell you the truth of that winter as it happened to me, because I was the last man in my own house to understand it, and a king who was blind under his own roof has no business pretending otherwise. That night I did nothing. I told myself I had misheard. A servant does not correct the bard song of a hold. A servant does not know the bard song of a hold, not the old marrow of it, not the way a lord's daughter raised on it might. I turned back to the table, to my castellan vase on my right hand, pouring me more wine than I wanted, to the business of being seen to feast, and I let the 4 words go. They did not let me go. For 3 nights I heard them under everything. When Voss spoke to me of grain stores and border wolves, I heard that verse is sung wrong. When I lay in the dark, I heard it. My wolf, the old restless self that lives under a man's skin in my line, that I had trusted my whole life to smell a lie before my ears could, my wolf sat up and would not lie down. It is hard to describe what the bond of my blood feels like when it wakes. It is not a howl. It is quieter and far worse. It is the feeling of standing in a familiar room and being certain with no reason at all that one thing in it has been moved. You cannot say which thing. You only know the room is wrong and that you will not sleep until you find it. On the 4th day, I went down to the hearths myself. Kings do not go to the ash cellars of their own halls. There's a whole country down there below the feasting floor, the under kitchens, the wood stores, the great cold rooms where the fires are fed and the bones are boiled, and the gray work of keeping a hold warm is done by people no one thanks. I had not been down since I was a boy. Voss met me at the stair with his hands already spreading, already smoothing, already asking what his king required that a servant could not have carried up to him. I want to see the hearths, I said. They are only hearths, my lord. Then it will be a short visit. He came with me. Of course he came with me. I understand now that Voss had spent 20 years making certain he was always the man beside me on any stair I chose to walk down. Then I only thought him tiresome. The underhall was hot and dim and smelled of wood smoke and wet stone and old fat, and the people in it went to their knees when they saw me, all but one. She was at the great feeding hearth with her back to me, a long iron bar in both hands, breaking a fallen ridge of embers so it would draw. She did not turn. For a moment I thought her deaf or a fool, and Voss thought so too. I saw him draw breath to bark at her. Then she set the bar down and turned and knelt like all the rest, and I saw her face for the first time in the light, and my wolf, which had been sitting up for 3 days, rose the whole way to its feet. I want to be honest about this because the ballads lie about it and I have heard the ballads. There was no thunder. There was no golden light. There was only a girl on her knees on a stone floor with soot on her wrists, looking at the floor and not at me, and the strangest sensation I have known in my life. The sensation of reading a page I had already read. As if somewhere long ago, before memory, I had been told exactly this face, this floor, this hush, and had forgotten it, and was now turning back to it and finding every word waiting where I had left it. I knew her. I had never seen her. Both were true at once, and the impossibility of it made the back of my neck cold. "Your name," I said. She did not lift her eyes. It was Voss who answered, smooth as poured oil. "She is a mute, my lord. She does no harm. We keep her out of charity. She was a foundling of the old troubles, no people, no line. The other girls call her Ash." He said it the way you would say the other girls call the broom the broom. A mute, a girl with no name and no people who had, 4 nights ago in a voice like a struck string, told me my bard song was wrong. I looked at her a long moment. She kept her eyes down, and I understood, not with my head yet, only with the old sense under it, that her stillness was not the stillness of an empty person. It was the stillness of a person holding something very heavy and very still so that it will not spill. I have stood over wounded soldiers who held their own breaking bones that way, so they would not cry out and shame themselves. She held herself like that, over what I could not have said. "Charity," I said to Voss, and turned and went back up the stair. And the whole cold way up I heard the 4 words again, and now they were louder. That verse is sung wrong. A mute cannot sing. I could have summoned her. I was the king. I could have had her brought to my chamber and stood over her until she spoke or wept. And she would have wept or lied or said nothing, and I would have learned nothing, and worse. I understand this now. I would have taught her that the king was one more thing to be survived. So I did not summon her. Instead, I began to watch my own house, and it is a bitter thing to learn how little a king sees of the house he thinks he rules. I watched at the feast the next night, and I saw it. When the platters came up from below, one girl carried the ashes out to the yard pit past the high table, always at the same hour, always by the same door, and every night the castellan's man at that door, one of his own, a wide, quiet fellow named Corse, watched her the whole way across the floor and back. Not the way a man watches a woman. The way a man watches a door he is paid to keep shut. I had walked past that small nightly play 3 winters running and never once seen it, because you do not see the furniture of your own hall. Now I could not stop seeing it. I watched, and I saw that the ash girl never went to the yard, never to the market days, never to the moor with the other servants when they were let out to gather. She was kept. Charitably, invisibly, entirely kept. And I watched her hands. That is the thing that broke the first lock for me in the end. Her hands. She scoured a great copper before the fire one evening, and the way she turned it, the way she set the heel of her palm to the base and swept the rag round the rim in one clean, unhurried circle, was not the way a scullion cleans a pot. It was the way a woman polishes a thing she loves. It was the way my own mother, the old Luna, had turned the moonstone cup at the high table when I was a boy, before she died, a particular grace, a particular ownership of the object, as though the object were hers to keep well. Servants use things. She tended them. Everything she touched, she tended, the way you tend only what is yours. That night I went to the one man in my hold older than the trouble Voss had spoken of. His name was Hesper, not a woman as the name sounds, but an old, old man, the last of the hearth-wardens from before my father's time, half-blind now, kept in a warm room above the kitchens because he had served the hold longer than the hold had had my family in it. I had thought him nearly witless. I found him sharper than my whole counsel. "The old song," I said when I had sent his attendant out and sat down where he could see the shape of me. "The midwinter hold song, the bard sings a verse, and the gray line held the gate. Is there another, an older one?" The old man was quiet so long I thought he had drifted. Then he said, without any fear at all, the way the very old speak when they have decided they will not be alive to be punished. "There is, and it is not sung. The bard your castellan chose does not know it. He was chosen because he does not know it." The cold came back to my neck. "Say it." He said it. I will not set the whole of it down, because it was long and it was hers before it was mine. But the marrow of it was this, that the gate of Hearth-Girl was not held by the gray line. A limp, empty phrase, a phrase built to replace, but by the house of Sarn, whose warden blood woke the hearthstone, whose seal was the Munandopen hand, who kept the high moor for the wolves of it not by right of conquest, but by right of the stone itself answering their hand. And that the true verse ended, and while a Sarn draws breath, the hearth is not gone cold. "The house of Sarn," I said. I had never heard the name. In 3 winters as king, in a lifetime as a prince of this hold, I had never once heard the name of the house that built the walls I slept in. "What became of them?" "They ended," old Hesper said, "the winter your grandfather died and your father was a boy, and no one yet knew which way the hold would fall." He turned his blind face toward the fire. "That is the word we were given. Ended. A fever, they said, the whole house in a season, and a steward's faction to hold the hold in trust until your father was grown, a young, clever steward who had married close to the old warden's line, close enough to make a claim, not close enough for the stone to answer him. He kept the hold warm and handed it up to your father clean, and everyone was very grateful, and the hearthstone in the great hall went dark that winter and has been dark ever since, and no one alive but me remembers that it was ever anything but a cold gray rock." The old man's mouth worked. "That steward's name was Voss. The clever one is dead. The one who serves you is his son, and he learned his father's whole trade at his father's knee, and the trade was this, to keep a thing buried and be thanked for the warmth. I sat in that warm little room, and I felt the floor of my whole life tilt. A fever does not spare one, I said slowly. A whole house in a season, was there no one, no child? Old Hesper's blind eyes found me with terrible accuracy. There was a daughter, he said. Infant, and the night the house ended. One of the hearth women, a good woman, long dead now, God keep her, carried a bundle down to the ash cellars and never carried it back up. And there has always been since that winter a girl among the ash who is kept apart and taught nothing and named nothing and let speak to no one. The Vosses did not kill her, you understand. Killing a warden's child leaves a body, and a body can be dug up and named. Far clever to bury her alive and nameless. A servant no one sees is a secret no one can find. She has been the safest buried thing in this hold for near 30 years, and she is buried still. I could not speak. The old man reached out with a hand like a dry leaf and, half-blind, found my sleeve. You have seen her, he said. It was not a question. That is why you have come. Something in you has smelled the wrong thing under the warm thing. Your blood is old, boy, older than the Vosses reckoned when they made their peace with your father. The stone knows its own, and so near enough to you. His grip tightened. Be careful. A buried thing kept safe 30 years is only safe so long as no one goes looking. The moment you are seen to look, she is no longer a secret. She is a danger. And Voss's father was clever, but Voss himself is frightened, and a frightened man does what a clever man would not. I went back to my hall and I did not sleep, and I understood two things. The first was that everything my life had rested on, my father's clean inheritance, my clear title, my untroubled crown, had been paid for by a crime committed against an infant, and that I had feasted 30 years on that piece and called it mine. The second was worse and truer, and belonged to the part of me the ballads would call the wolf, and I will simply call my heart. That when I thought of the girl in the ash, the girl with no name, buried alive and nameless her whole life so that men could be thanked for warmth, I did not feel the cool pity a king feels for a wronged subject. I felt the thing turn over in my chest that had been turning since her 4 words in the feast hall, the page already read, the room rearranged, the knowing. My blood had gone looking through my whole hold for the one thing that was wrong, and it had found her, and it had not come back saying here is a crime. It had come back saying here is mine. I want to be plain for the women who will hear this told who are past being lied to about love. I did not decide to want her. I have decided many things in my life. That was not one of them. It was already true before I knew her name, the way the true verse of the song was already true while the false one was sung over it. All that was left to me was whether I would be a coward about a truth or not. But I was a king with a frightened, clever man at my right hand who had spent his life keeping a thing buried, and I had, without meaning to, been seen to look. Old Hesper was right. I had gone to the hearths. I had asked her name. Voss had watched me watch her. Whatever I did next I had to do quickly, and I had to do it so that the truth came up into the light where it could not be pushed back down, because a truth spoken in a locked room is only a thing the powerful can bury twice. And I could not simply say it. I could stand in my hall and cry that the Hearth-Girl was the lost heir of Sarn, and Voss would spread his hands and be sad about his king's strange fancy, and produce 10 servants to swear she was a nameless foundling, and by spring I would half doubt it myself. A king's word is strong, but a king's word against 30 years of careful, warm, thanked-for lies is not strong enough. I needed the truth to prove itself, in front of everyone, in a way no smooth hand could smooth away. I needed the stone. The hearthstone of Viharholt sat in the great hall exactly where it had always sat, a broad, dark, silver-gray stone the size of a shield set into the breast of the high hearth, cold to the touch, so much a part of the wall that guests set their cups on it. I had done it myself. A cold, gray rock. While a Sarn draws breath, the hearth is not gone cold. If old Hesper's marrow verse was true, if the stone answered warden blood and had answered no one for 30 years because the last of that blood had been buried alive in her own house, then the stone was not decoration. It was a witness. The only witness Voss could not bribe, exile, or grieve into silence. A witness of stone. But I could not test it in a locked room either. If I brought her to the dark stone in the night and it woke to her hand, I would know, and Voss would know, and Voss would make certain the stone never had the chance to wake for anyone else. It had to happen where the whole hold could see. It had to happen at the one time in the year the whole hold stood in that hall with their eyes already on the hearth. It had to happen at the midwinter fire. I had a week. I spent it being to Voss's eyes exactly the king he wished me to be, bored, incurious, done with the hearths, full of the feast to come. I did not go below again. I did not ask her name again. I let him watch me forget her. And I saw the ease come back into his shoulders day by day, and I hated the ease of him, and I hid the hating. But 3 times that week I found ways to be near her, that a king may be near a servant without a castellan reading it as anything. The first time she carried water past the training yard where I stood with my captains, and I stepped as if idly into her path, and I said low, not looking at her, the verse, "You know, the true one." Her hands did not shake on the pails, she did not look up. But I saw her breath stop, and I saw swift, then gone, the thing in her face that a person shows when, after 30 years, someone finally speaks to the buried self and not the buried self's grave. She went on. She said nothing. A mute cannot answer. But she had heard me say the verse, and the true one, and she knew that I knew there was a true one, and I saw the small, terrible hope of it land in her like a coal, and I saw her, from long habit, put her hand over it so it would not show. The second time I did a foolish thing. I went down at the gray hour before dawn when the hearths were being woken and the underhall was nearly empty, and I found her alone at the great fire, and I did not command her and I did not touch her. I only crouched down on the far side of the flames where the light was between us, so she would not feel cornered, and I spoke to her as I have never spoken to a subject in my life. Plainly, as one buried person to another, for a king is buried too, only in a warmer grave. "I know what was done to you," I said. "I did not know it a fortnight ago. I know it now. Your house was not ended. Your house was hidden, one girl of it, carried down here in the dark and kept nameless so that other men could be thanked for keeping the hold warm. I know the name they took from you. I am not going to say it here where the wrong ears are. But I know it, and it is a true name, an old and honored one, and it is yours, and I mean to give it back to you in the light where no one can take it a second time." She had gone very still. And then the only time in all of it that her discipline broke. A single tear went down through the soot on her face, and she did not wipe it, and she looked at me across the fire, straight at me, eyes up for the first time, and her eyes were gray as the stone and old as the moor and awake, fully awake. A person entirely present and entirely alive behind 30 years of playing dead, and she moved her lips. No sound came. She was not truly mute. I understood that in the same moment, she had simply learned before she could walk that a buried thing that makes a sound gets dug up and drowned, and so she had buried her own voice deepest of all, the last and safest secret. But her lips shaped a word, and the word was not a name and not a plea. She shaped at me across the fire, one word. "Careful." She was warning me. Buried alive her whole life, nameless, kept, and the first use she made of her freed face was to tell her king to have a care for himself. I have led wolves into 3 winters of border war. I have never in my life been as undone as I was by that soundless word from a soot-streaked girl across a kitchen fire. "I will be careful," I told her. "Be ready at the midwinter fire. When it is time, and you will know when, come to the great hearth, to the dark stone. Whatever is said, whoever tries to stop you, come to the stone and put your hand on it. Only that. Put your hand on it and let the stone say what men have spent 30 years refusing to." She looked at me a long moment. Then she nodded once, a warden's nod. A "yes, I have understood the order, and I will hold the gate" nod. And she bent again to the fire, and I rose and went up and left her the last of her buried days. The third time I did not go near her at all. The third time I stood at a high window and watched the yard, and I saw course, the castellan's wide quiet man standing a long while in talk with 2 others of Voss's, and I saw them look up all 3, toward the kitchen stair, and I understood that my week of playing the incurious king had not been believed after all. Voss was frightened. Old Hesper had told me what a frightened man does. That night I doubled the hall guard with my own sworn wolves and told my captain to watch not the gates but the stairs, and to let no one, not the castellan, not the castellan's men, no one take any servant up or down or out of the hold before the midwinter fire, on my word as king and on their own necks. My captain was a blunt man, and he did not ask why. I have kept him near me ever since. I was almost too late as it was. In the black middle of the night before midwinter, Voss tried to dig up his secret and drown it quietly, exactly as his father would have a cart at the kitchen postern, Corse, and 2 others. A bundled shape between them being taken out to the moor for the fever house, they said when my wolves stopped them. "The Heir-Girl's taken the winter fever, we're only taking her out so it don't spread." My captain, God keep his blunt, honest soul, did exactly as I had ordered and not one thing more. He did not accuse, he did not fight. He simply stood in the postern with 6 wolves and said no one leaves before the fire, king's word, and turned that cart around. And the bundled shape in the cart, which was meant to be dug up and drowned in the dark where no stone could witness it, was carried back inside instead, into a warm, guarded room, alive. They had gagged her so she could not cry out. A woman who had never in 30 years dared make a sound, and they had still gagged her from the pure habit of burying. When my captain took the cloth from her mouth, she did not scream and she did not weep. She looked at him and she said aloud, the first word he ever heard her speak, in a low, clear, steady voice that had been waiting 30 years for a night worth spending itself on, she said, "Then the king was right. Keep me till the fire." The midwinter fire. You must see the hall as it was. The whole hold in it, every wolf of V. Harholt, the long tables cleared to the walls, and in the center the great hearth roaring, the highest fire of the year, and above the flames set into the stone breast the old dark hearthstone that everyone had set a cup on, and no one had looked at in 30 years. Voss at my right hand, splendid and pale, his splendor a shade too careful, a man who had failed to bury a thing in the night and did not yet know how much I knew. My sworn wolves ranged along the walls where a castellan would read them as honor guard, and a wiser man would read them as a net. I rose to speak the midwinter word, as the king does, and I did not speak the word they expected. "Tonight," I said, and the hall quieted, "I mean to have the true song sung. Not the one my bard was taught, the older one, the one that was sung in this hall before it was sung wrong." I felt Voss go still beside me. I did not look at him. "There is a verse," I said to my people, "that the house that built these walls kept the house of Sarn, whose seal was the moon and the open hand, whose warden blood woke this stone at my back, and whose true verse ends, while a Sarn draws breath, the hearth is not gone cold." I laid my hand flat on the dark hearthstone, cold as a grave under my palm. 30 winters this stone has been cold. 30 winters we have been told the last of that blood ended in a fever, and that good stewards kept the hold warm in trust, and we have thanked them for the warmth. Now I looked at Voss. "Have we not, castellan?" His face was a marvel. I will grant him that to my last day, not one crack in it. "My lord speaks of old sorrows," he said gently. "The winter fever was a grief before your father's time. We honor the dead, but surely the midwinter fire is no place for." "The dead are not here," I said. "Bring her in." They brought her in. They had cleaned the soot from her face, and taken the gray shift and put on her my order, sent in the night to the one hearthwoman who had loved her mother's memory. A plain gown of undyed wool, no crown, no jewel, nothing borrowed, nothing that could be called a costume. She came into the roaring gold light of the highest fire of the year as exactly what she was. A tall, gray-eyed woman with a warden's straight back and a servant's careful hands, alone, unadorned, awake. The hall did not know her. Why would they? A nameless ash girl. There was a murmur of puzzlement. And then the murmur changed, and I have never forgotten the sound of it, because it was the sound of a hall of people seeing. Because now that she was standing in the light with her face unbowed and her eyes up, half the old wolves in that hall, the ones gray enough to remember, were looking from her face to the shield above the door where the Munandopan hand of the old wardens was carved into the lintel and painted over and forgotten, and back to her face. And the likeness that 30 years of soot and bowed heads had hidden was, in that gown, in that light, plain as the stone. Voss said, quick and low, and only to me, "My lord, this is a servant, a foundling. I can bring a dozen to swear." "You can," I agreed. "And I could bring old Hesper to swear otherwise, and it would be his word against your dozen, and men would argue it for 40 years and call it a sad old story. So we will not ask men." I turned from him. I looked at her across the fire as I had looked at her across the little kitchen fire in the gray dawn, and I saw that she remembered it too. "Come to the stone," I said gently to her in front of them all. "You have carried the ash of this hearth your whole life. Come and put your hand on the stone of it, only that." The hall held its breath. Voss's man Corse shifted along the wall, and one of my wolves shifted to face him, and Corse thought better of it. She crossed the floor. She did not hurry and she did not falter. She came the way she had swept the rim of the copper pot, the way a person moves toward what is hers. She stopped before the dark hearthstone that she had fed with wood 10,000 mornings and never once been let touch as anything but a servant. She looked at it. Then she looked at me. And then she lifted her hand, a servant's hand, soot in the cracks of it no washing takes out, and she laid her open palm flat on the cold gray stone. For one long moment nothing happened, and my whole life balanced on that nothing, and I thought, coldly, distantly, if I am wrong I have raised a poor servant up before the hold only to break her, and I will never forgive myself. Then the stone woke. I will not pretend to understand the old magic of my hold. I am a king, not a hearth warden. But I will tell you what every wolf in that hall saw with their own eyes, so that it can never be sung wrong again. Under her open hand, the dark stone that had been cold 30 years took a slow, deep warmth, and a light came up in it, not a flash, not a fire, but a deep, even silver glow like moonlight seen through water, welling up out of the gray heart of the stone and spreading out from her palm to the four edges of it. And in the center of that glow, where her hand pressed, the old forgotten seal surfaced through the stone itself, the moon and the open hand. As though it had been there all along under the gray, and only ever wanted the right palm to draw it up. The stone was warm. The hearth of Hearth-Girl, 30 winters cold at its heart, was warm again, and it had warmed to her, and it warmed to no one else in that hall, and it could not be argued with, and it could not be bought, and it could not be grieved into silence because it was stone, and stone had waited 30 years to tell the truth and would not be hushed a second time. The hall went to its knees, not by my command, I gave no command. They went down the way people go down before a thing that is simply, undeniably true, the old wolves first weeping, the gray ones who remembered, and then the rest, the whole hold sinking to the stone floor around the warm, bright hearth and the gray-eyed woman with her hand upon it. While a sarn draws breath, the hearth is not gone cold. She drew breath. The hearth was not cold. There it was in the light for everyone forever. And I looked at Voss. He was not on his knees. He stood at the high table, white now, truly white, his careful splendor fallen off him, and I saw the whole clever buried life of him and his father in his face at once. The warm, thanked-for lie, 30 years of it, standing in the light it had spent everything to avoid. I could have killed him where he stood. My wolves were ranged for it, a word would have done it. Every man in that hall would have called it justice. And I will confess to you honestly, because the women who hear this are owed honesty and not a saint, for the length of one breath I wanted to, for what was done to her in the dark, for the gag in the night. For 30 years of a girl holding her own voice buried, so it would not get her drowned. But I am the Alpha King of Hearth-Girl, and my house feasted 30 years on the peace his crime bought, and there is no clean hand in that hall's history but the gray-eyed woman's at the stone, and a king who answers a buried crime with a fresh killing has only dug a new grave and called it justice. And she was watching me. Not the stone, not the kneeling hall. Me, watching to see what her king was now that he had the power to be anything. So I did the harder thing. Voss, I said, and my voice carried the length of that silent hall. Your father buried a warden's child alive in her own house and taught you the trade, and you plied it well, and you would have finished it in the moor in the dark 2 nights ago had my wolves not turned your cart. That is the truth, and the stone at her hand is the witness of it, and there is no dozen you can buy to unsay a warm stone. I came down from the high table and stood before him where all could see. I will not kill you. A killing lets you off cheaply and lets my house off cheaper, for we ate the warmth you stole, and I'll not wash that clean with your blood and call the account settled. Here is your account. You are stripped of the castlany, of every honor, of the very name of trust. Every ledger you kept will be opened before the hold and read aloud, all 30 years, every warm lie of it, and you will stand and hear it read. What was taken will be given back to its true warden with your own hands. And then you will live, Voss, a nameless man in the hold you kept nameless, and you will feed the hearth you left cold, and you will do it under her mercy and not mine, because the wrong was hers before it was ever the crown's, and it is hers to weigh. He looked at me, and then, because there was nothing else left in the world for him to look at, he looked at her. And she, the buried one, the drowned voice, the ash girl, spoke, aloud in that low, clear, steady voice, the second time the hall ever heard it, and the first time it ever heard its name. I am Muriel, she said, of the house of Sarn, warden of this hearth. My mother died the night your father took this hold, and I was carried down into the dark of my own house, and I have carried its ashes up every morning of my life, not knowing they were mine. She looked at the man who had buried her. She did not raise her voice. You will not die, Voss. My family died enough for one house. You will live, and you will keep this fire, and every morning when you feed it, you will remember that it is warm because I am alive, which is the one thing your father worked hardest in all the world to make untrue. That is my mercy. Take it. It is more than was ever shown to me. I have stood in war councils among the fiercest wolves of the north and never heard a sentence land with more weight than that soft one, from that unadorned woman at that warm stone. Voss went down then, not gracefully, not nobly, but down to his knees on the stone floor with the rest, undone at last, and it was a truer justice than his death would ever have been, and I have never once regretted it, and neither in all the winters since has she. That is nearly the whole of it. There is a little more, and it is the part I keep for myself, and I will give you only the edge of it, because some things a king may say to a hall, and some he keeps for one gray-eyed woman by a warm fire. When the hall had risen, when Voss had been led away to begin the long reading of his ledgers, when the old wolves had come one by one to kneel to their true warden with tears in their beards, when the hold of Hearth-Girl had, in a single night, remembered a name it had been made to forget for 30 years. When all of that was done, and the fire had burned low, and it was only the two of us left in the great hall with the warm stone, I did the last thing. And it was the thing I had wanted to do, since 4 words struck me in the dark of a feast a lifetime ago. I did not claim her, understand that. She had been taken, carried, kept, buried, gagged, made into an object 30 years running, and I would sooner have walked into the winter moor and not come back than add my wanting to the long list of things done to her. So I did not claim her. I stood a careful arm's length off, by the warm stone that was hers and not mine, and I told her the truth, which is the only gift I had that no one had ever given her. You are the warden of Hearth-Girl, I said. The hold is yours by the stone's own word. I hold no crown here the stone does not grant. You owe me nothing. You may put me out of it if you choose. You would be within the old right, and I would go, and see you kept safe in it to my last breath, and count it a fair price for 30 years of my house's peace. I found it hard to say the rest, and said it anyway. And there is one more truth, and I give it to you as a truth and not a claim to do with as you please. I knew you before I knew your name. My blood went looking through my whole hold for the one thing that was wrong, and it found you, and it did not come back saying a crime. It came back saying mine, not mine to keep, mine the way the stone is yours, mine the way a thing is when it has been waiting your whole life and you only just turned the page and found it there. I did not decide it. I cannot undecide it. But I will never once act on it that you do not freely will. The door of this hold is open to you in every direction. Stay or go or send me from it. The choice is yours, and it is the first true choice anyone has left you, and I would rather die than take it back. She was quiet a long while by the warm stone in the low gold light. 30 years of learning that a buried thing that speaks gets drowned. It takes more than one night to unlearn it. I did not hurry her. I have never once, in all our winters, hurried her. Then she said in that low, clear voice, looking not at the stone now but at me, "All my life I tended what was mine and was told it was not mine. The pots, the copper, the fire, the song, my own name. I learned to love things without being let to keep them." She took, then, one step across the space I had so carefully kept, and closed it herself of her own will, and laid her hand, the soot still in the cracks of it, and always will be, and I would not have it washed for all the more, flat against my chest, over the place where 4 words had struck me in the dark, over the page that had turned to her before I ever knew her name. "I am done tending what I am not allowed to keep," she said. "You I will keep, since you are, as you say, mine." And that is the truest verse of the whole song, and I have never let it be sung wrong. She rules Hearth-Girl now, warden by the stone's word and Luna by mine, and the hearthstone is warm every morning, and Voss feeds it, an old nameless man under her mercy. And every year at the midwinter fire the bard sings the true verse, the old one, the marrow one, and the hold sings it with him, all of it, to the end. And while a sarn draws breath, the hearth is not gone cold. There is a sarn, she draws breath beside me as I set this down. The hearth is warm. I was the last man in my own house to understand it. I have spent every winter since making certain I am never the last to understand her again.